Hi, this is Josh. I want to go over the signal phrase exercise. It's important to have integrated source use in our writing so that we're not letting sources take over and that we're also supporting our points properly. So this is just an exercise in doing that. A signal phrase, another name for it is a tag identifier. It's what we do before summary, quoting, or paraphrase, the three types of source use. These are all quotes we're dealing with. So a signal phrase almost always goes before something. It leads into the quote. It can tell something about the author's name, their credentials, their affiliation, when it was published, how popular it was it well received. There's all kinds of moves that the writer can make to be active and not passive in leading into source use. If we just start with a quote, that's called cold quoting, and it's not something good readers really enjoy. They're jolted into a paragraph or into a sentence with no setup, often no interpretation, and that's not integrated writing. We're working in academic writing on integration. So we know where those are placed. We know the definition of a signal phrase. Integration in writing. It's crucial to develop your writing. We're more interested most of the time in what you do with a quote than the quote itself. Quotes are easy. We can paste them in. And they don't say much. They don't speak for themselves. I know in high school you might get away with that. But active writing at the college level, we have to interpret. So you might have a one-sentence quote that you interpret in 3 sentences. It's very important. So I'm going to go through this signal phrase exercise. We have these chunks of quotes. The required use is this underlined red font. That part of it has to be used somehow. You have to set it up. Otherwise, there's no signal phrase, and that's sort of beside the point. You would cite it. I gave the page numbers, and so you put that in parentheses. If we use the author's name for the setup, we don't also put the author in the parentheses. It goes one place or the other. So often you'll want to save the author's name for the parenthetical citation. Okay, it's important not to leave in unquoted words. A lot of people get hung up on this highlighted section here. You must add commentary. We call it interpretation. You can't just throw in the same signal phrase every time. Variation in writing leads to style. Your style already is how you vary things. If you don't vary things, then you have an undeveloped style. We're working on developing style here. So, to be clear, each quote must feature both the setup and the interpretation. I'm interested in what you do before and after the quote. The quotes are pretty obvious. That's why they're in red. That's why they're underlined. The point here is to just get working with dealing with source information and not just treating it as if it's self-evident, self-explanatory. Okay? So we have this quote. And here's the first example. The part you absolutely have to use is the red. You can use the other stuff, but you don't have to. And so let's just take this. I'm going to lead into it. We know it's from a book, we know the page, and we know the author. We might use any one of those 3. So here's my try at a signal phrase. There's a quote. So first off, let's quote their words. And I'm going to show you what a lot of people did or do when they do this. There's the citation. I'm told where it came from. There's the quote. I didn't lead into it yet. I didn't say what it meant yet. I'm going to make it not red, and I'm going to make it not underlined. All right. Typically, you might restate what the quote means. In other words, so here's the quote. I'm going to make it easier to see here, and I'm going to just comment on it. The quote is about people taking advantage and connecting government to industry. So industry in government. Okay, there's 2 sentences of interpretation. corporations and railroads took favors, enormous ones that helped produce the world's biggest fortunes. So we have this kind of double dash phrase in here. Enormous favors, world's biggest fortunes. What I did was I interpreted that. I mentioned the word robber barons. That's not in the original. It's mine. Just use that. And also, so there's no citing we need to do. We're interpreting directly what we just quoted. In other words, industry and government were working together just for the benefit of corporations. Now, maybe it's not just for the benefit, maybe mainly. That's interpretation. We're doing this as writers do. We're not going from the start to the end. We might do the signal phrase last. I don't know the year of the book here, but I might say something like a book on the verb really matters here, guys. We have to have something like notes, suggests, contends, asserts. Some kind of claim is being made in the book by Phillips on 232. So a book on the history of corporate corruption, notes of the 19th century railroads, 19th century business, American business. So notice that it's actually trickier for me sometimes to do a signal phrase than the interpretation. The interpretation comes directly from this. Then when I'm trying to set it up, it's more the context. So this is something that would be in a body paragraph. It might this would not be a topic sentence for a paragraph, but it would be probably right after a topic sentence. The topic sentence could even be something like this. If I indented, the paragraph could be graft and corruption are not new features of American life or business. So there, I could add that on. Now notice that I could have done all this and then added the topic sentence, then connected it back to the thesis. Writing is recursive and chaotic. It's not linear. We don't go from beginning to end necessarily. Now here's what a lot of people will tend to do with this assignment. They're going to quote this, and here's plagiarism, guys. And this is what I get in an effort not to have you plagiarize. We're getting plagiarism. Some of you did this. Oh, there we go. And what this ignores is that this section and this section are not you. This is them. And if you don't quote them and you include them in your writing without quoting, even if you cite, that's plagiarism. You must cite quoted, you must quote quoted words, you must cite them. And this is not your signal phrase, that's Phillips' quote. You're just pulling in parts of his quote as your signal phrase. No, that's plagiarism. So we have to always be clear about what's yours and theirs. That's the whole point of citing. Quotes always show that it's their words, but these are their words too. That's still Phillips. That's all still Phillips. That's not your commentary. So if that's what you did, or if that's what you intend to do, you need to really fix that. It cannot look like that. So I was seeing people using in their commentary usurpations. It's definitely not a word any of you would use, and that's Phillips. So I don't care whether you use Phillips's quote here or not in your answer. You could have used the whole chunk. If it's over 4 lines, it'd be treated as a long quote. We double indent it. Just for future reference, we would double indent it. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the fact that people are so struggling to add any commentary. And in struggling to add commentary, they're plagiarizing. And in plagiarizing, they're not putting their own signal phrases in, and we have problems. So, well-integrated writing at the college level. You need to lead in to your source use in some way. Just like handing off a baton in a relay race. You're giving it to someone else. This shows that it's not you that's about to happen, so even if you summarized here, we would know that it's from Phillips, even if it was entirely in your words and summarized. But this part has to be from me. It cannot be, legitimate encouragement of industry and technology. That's not you. If you include that, that's not in commentary. That's quoting, and you'd be required to comment on that. We comment on what we cite. We're more interested in what you do with the source material than in the material itself. End of story. So if you have question that, work on this in postings, work on this in your essays. I'm certainly going to expect varied setup, and I always want to be clear where a source use starts. This signal phrase tells me that something from somewhere else is about to occur, and that's what I need to know as a good reader. I'm not going to appreciate just being thrown a quote with no interpretation. Quotes are excuses to argue.